Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show. Donna is an international mental practitioner, psychic, award-winning author, counselor, speaker, teacher, and radio television talk show personality. She brings to the airwaves talented people from around the world who share their insights and experiences with you, the listening audience. Now, let's join Donna.
Hello, good day, good evening, wherever you may be on this fabulous planet of ours. We are going to be taking a journey with a woman who, after her brother died. It was, well, you might say a totally unexpected journey of not just self-awareness, but also the awareness that when a loved one dies, their physical body may be gone, but their essence, their spirit, who they are and what they are, still exists. We are going to be talking with Rebecca Austill-Clausen. And Rebecca, I'm going to use you by your nickname, Becky. I'm just so delighted that you're sharing this time with us because I think it gives not just a sense of hope to people, but an awareness that sometimes what may be considered a very, very emotionally, challenging, a draining situation, an agonizing situation, and that is the death of a loved one. Welcome to the show.
Donna, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to speak with you and your audience.
I have been in the work of mind. I'm also a psychic and a medium. And Rebecca, I could relate so strongly to so many of the experiences that you have had. Now, I have not had the particular arrangement of experiences you've had, but I found them very freeing. And it was delightful to me to be able to read about your transitioning into an understanding of how life goes on. It doesn't stop with the death of a loved one. It goes on, and how you ended up finding out about your own skills. Share the story about your brother and what happened with him.
Well, I'm very glad to share it. My brother passed when he was 37 years old, and 3 years before he passed, we were walking on the beach in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and David was gay, and I just casually asked him if he had been tested for AIDS. Now, this was in the early 1990s, and thousands of people were dying of AIDS, and David turned away, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected at all. And it turns out that he was HIV positive. I didn't even know what that was. He asked me to please keep it quiet. He was getting very good care, but at that time, people thought when you had AIDS that you could get it by even being in the same room. Mm-hmm. And he said he was taking very good care of himself, and he didn't want to be treated any differently. So what happened was I found myself in New Age bookstores, which I didn't even know what New Age was, but I found myself reading about the afterlife, and it was the first time that I'd ever really thought that we had any type of existence other than our physical existence here on Earth. Well, David ended up passing, and it was a horrendous time. I couldn't believe my 37-year-old brother died. And 6 weeks after he passed, I continued to be filled with grief. And I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm, and I love the symbolism of that because I received the best present of my life that day. And it was a beautiful day. It was in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, and we had just had our first frost. And so there were icicles in the trees and rainbows sparkling from the icicles, and I opened up my heart just a little bit, which had been very closed because I had been so filled with grief. But I opened it up a little bit, and I said, thank you, universe, for a beautiful day. I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. And he was in human form. He was wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. And it was a magnificent vision. It was a magnificent experience. I started to talk with him because I didn't know anything different. I had absolutely no psychic or spiritual experience at all. And then within a moment, I realized I could just send thought. And he was great, and I was great. And I looked behind him, And they were my grandparents that had passed 10 years before, holding hands like they always did. There was Edward, one of his best friends who had passed, Tolly, a friend of mine who passed, and 24 other people. And the story goes on, but it was the first time that I realized that life was eternal, and it was an absolute fantastic feeling.
You have a poem that you started the book with by Mary Oliver, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and it's titled The World I Live In. I have refused to live locked in an orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I've seen. I'll just tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. Mary Oliver. That poem, I think, is a very powerful statement. And I think one of the greatest gifts that can be given is an awareness that there is this life that goes on. And I think sometimes we are made aware of that, but we're indoctrinated with so much fear that we just don't know any different. And this is something, it doesn't mean you won't miss someone. I think of Olga Worrell, a very, very talented healer and a mystic in her own right. She was recognized by scientists for being able to do what she could do, send healing energy thousands of miles. She was part of scientific research, all of this stuff. She and her husband used to hold healing services on a regular basis, and they were incredible people. Well, when her husband died, people would say, why are you crying? Don't you've helped so many deal with death. She said, yes, but he's not here physically. And that's where our grief comes from. That those loved ones, we can not hold them physically. And your experience that you just shared makes us aware that whatever love we've had with someone, whatever we've shared with that person, that never goes away. It's still there, isn't it?
It is, and it's been so fantastic to have a continuing relationship with my brother. I looked for a teacher. I found a teacher. I communicate with my brother all the time. My parents recently passed, and for me to have continuing love and receive continuing love from both my parents, my brother, my loved ones that have passed has been so healing and absolutely fantastic.
I think that this is a tremendous gift that your book, Changemaker, that is what it's titled, Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. This is so significant because it, I think, can be very healing for someone that has gone through a loss with a member of family, for someone that has lost, someone they love very, very dearly that may not be a member of family. It could be an animal that you've lost. It could be a very dear friend. All of this, you realize that your life isn't empty, that it's not the end of a life. You are beginning. Now, your story also goes on to share just what you've done and a little bit of a statement that you've made, that you have been able to move forward, and you really started developing your mediumship and your skills of mind using different tools, different implements. Now, you're married, you have 2 beautiful children. This was quite a surprise. How did your family deal with it, or did they say, oh, this is Mom, she's always nuts? So, I mean, how did they work with this without going, and your dad's a minister? Your parents have just recently passed, but your dad was a minister, an evangelical minister, and all of this, how did you work through that? How did you manage to not have someone saying, you ought to be put into a mental institution because of what are you doing?
Donna, that's an excellent question. I feel very lucky. My husband was very supportive from the first moment I told him about this, and I kept it quiet I rarely talked about this for 20 years. I kept it quiet. My parents were supportive. My dad said, well, Becky, people deal with death in all sorts of ways, and that's pretty much his statement. My mom would just sort of look at me and think, well, I'm glad you believe that would happen, but she didn't tell me that I was crazy or I was nuts or I was schizophrenic or I was an imbecile. Like, she didn't say any of those words. And my kids, well, they were, Kenny and Ryan, they were, when this whole thing happened, they were about 5 and 4 or 6 and 7 or something like that. And so they learned that I believed that Uncle David was still alive, and they accepted it as sort of a given. And so I was lucky in the fact that my family didn't think that I was crazy. And it was more me just trying to understand how I can justify this non-scientific world in my very scientific occupational therapy life. And that's why I kept it quiet for 20 years. But during that 20 years, that's when I studied and really delved into all of this. And it made a lot of sense to me. And it's been a wonderful existence.
Yes, it has been. Now, you ended up going into, and again, you've got a background in occupational therapy. You're well-educated. You are a person that was a workaholic. And one of the gifts that this gave you was the awareness to not be a workaholic. It was an awareness to sort of let life flow. And that was totally the opposite of the way your life had operated before this. The depth of perception, the wonderful teacher, Nancy, that you had, what a gracious woman she is, and what you were able to share with her. I love the statement that you said she made, that she learned from you. You were the student, but as the teacher, she also was a student. And that's what any good teacher will say. Any good teacher will say, I don't know it all. So you may be going through experiences I've not gone through, but if I can help you, I will do that. Let me share with you what I know, but I'm also open to other experiences. And the two of you had this wonderful exchange, and because of that association with such a wonderful teacher, you really were able to grow and expand at an extraordinarily rapid rate.
I agree. It was, that first year was absolutely incredible, and that's how I tried to write my book, Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, is that every chapter is a month. And so it started actually today. October 1st is when my brother passed away 24 years ago, and so the first chapter talks about what happened in October, and the second chapter November, and it was a magical year. And when you were talking about flow, my life has flowed so well since that time. It really has been astounding and very exciting, and I'm filled with gratitude for everything that's being shown me, and it's really especially what my brother David's been showing me. It's really quite lovely.
I had to chuckle at the comment that Nancy made to you about people on the other side, because there was something that had occurred with David. And again, people, if they read the book Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, what I found so fascinating is that you found that David was in sort of a negative kind of an attitude. And she said, well, just because someone passed over doesn't mean they get angel wings. They're just like they were on Earth. They're going to have their moods. Right. They're going to have their attitudes. And I've always told people, if somebody's a schmuck here, they're probably going to be a schmuck on the other side. And you have to realize that you've got to be sort of pragmatic about this. And if you end up having an unpleasant visitor, you have to show them the front door, so to speak, and give them the boot. And you did that with one energy that came through to you. You literally flushed her down the commode, and I loved that one. I just thought that was really cool.
Well, it it was so curious because when David comes to visit me, he's always very happy, but there was that one time that he was just a little grumpy. And that's when Nancy, who's a shaman, and she said, well, Becky, Uncle Herman's always Uncle Herman, whether he's here on this earth or he's passed. And then when I had that visit from an entity, a spiritual entity that initially seemed like she was going to be fine and she had all these things she wanted to teach me, but she was so aggressive that it just wasn't feeling right. And Nancy had taught me that if something doesn't feel right, to send it away. And it was the funniest thing to visualize a commode, a toilet, and to watch this entity go down, down, down into the waters. And I flushed her away. But then, I thought about it a couple of days later, and I'm like, why is it that she came to visit me? And sometimes I could be pretty direct with my thoughts, and maybe I was being shown that I was being a bit too directive at times. And so it really was a whole learning experience. But yes, if something doesn't feel right, we absolutely can send it away.
And Nancy also told you that this energy also was an extension of yourself. That you, yes, just what you said by being very direct, you were at that time a woman that work came first. This is the way things were done. Dum, 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 dum. Do any of my audience relate to that kind of an attitude? Oh, I'm sure none of them do. But, that is something I've been guilty of. It's that if you're an A-type personality, and someone told me I'm an A personality, I said, oh, no, I'm not. They said, check it out, kid, you really are. Anyway, what I wanted to share with that is we often will label people, but we do have a tendency to be a workaholic. And in our society, that is something that's like a badge of honor. This is good. But there really needs to be a balance. There needs to be that openness. And that is another gift that you were given. And that is you found that a lot of that work intensity did not make you become apathetic. That's not it at all. It didn't make you become irresponsible. That's not it at all. What it made you aware of is balance. And I think for so many of us in the American environment, we don't know how to do that and do that well. You were given that gift, weren't you?
I was, and it's a gift that I continue to learn, but it's been so pleasant to realize that I don't always have to work, that I actually can take a few moments and spend time outside in nature, spend time with my family, enjoy being with my friends, and certainly through meditation, it has absolutely calmed me down tremendously, and it's been magical. It's been marvelous.
I really think so. Now, part of Nancy's training with you was taking you through meditations that allowed you to integrate with animal totems, with various things. This was quite an eye-opener for you, wasn't it?
Yes, I didn't know any of this existed, and we did a lot of shamanic journeying. We did a lot of Reiki. It really was mind-boggling, and I frequently desired validation. I knew I was getting a little far out because this was in the 1990s, and it was not as well accepted as it is now. And I remember going out to the Foundation for Shamanic Studies out in California, and they were doing a lot of shamanic journeying, which is where you travel to different realms of existence. And I wanted to learn from the top fellow, and his name's Dr. Michael Harner. And one of the first things he said, it was a weekend workshop on what he called core shamanism, basic principles that shamans around the world have. And he said that he was a faculty member at the New School of Social Research. Well, my Uncle Alan was the dean at the New School of Social Research. And I called up Uncle Alan, and I said, hey, Uncle Alan, do you know Dr. Michael Harner? And he says, why, yes, he is on my faculty, and I hired him, and he does a lot with shamanism. he's a good fellow, Becky. And that was the type of validation that I needed, having someone from my family, someone that I respected, to say, yes, this fellow that you're learning from is solid, he's a professional, and he's good, he's valid. And it helped me a lot to know that I wasn't going off the deep end. So that was very, very nice to hear.
Well, that was interesting, the statement you just made about a member of your family being the dean of the very environment that this gentleman worked in. It's almost as if it's a circle of connections.
Yes.
That you talk about. So your experiences and your journey was meant to happen so that you could be a part of that circle, if you will, so that the knowledge can be passed on. And your book is doing the job for you, too, in a different way. There is a comment you have in your book, and I'm going to quote it exactly. We have unlimited access to the universe if we only take advantage of the opportunity. We have limitations inside us, yet they can be surmounted if we allow ourselves to believe in a life of infinite abundance. Now, this is a huge statement because it means no matter where anyone is, no matter what life patterning they're experiencing, no matter what is happening in the world as the media is portraying it, we as individuals have an unlimited access to the universe that we live in if we take advantage of the opportunity. Right there, that is a statement of freedom and free will that if, I'd say, just 50% of the population adopted, the shift on this planet would be incredible.
I totally agree. I think everything in life is positive, and even if we're experiencing horrendous situations, we can learn something positive about it if we believe that we can move forward in a positive direction, because we can. We're here on this earth to learn and to discover our purpose and to continue our life as spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings in a physical body, and we are spirit, we're energy, we're positive, we live forever. And I fully believe that everything has a positive impact, regardless of how it looks initially.
Nancy also made a comment, and this is in your book, that when one is journeying, and this, I think, can be applied into so many different modalities, if one's intention is that you want to always receive and give the highest good, it's going to be a win-win. This is an attitude, a perspective that I think is wonderful. And this obviously has changed your life, too.
It absolutely has. Well, I fully believe that thought has energy. And the more positive thought we have, the more positive actions will result. And the more negative we are, negativity surrounds us. And we can move out of that negativity by turning it around into a positive action. But energy is so powerful and so paramount. It surrounds us. It's within us. And whatever we can do to facilitate the access and the awareness of energy, I think can definitely help. Biofield energy modalities and integrative medicine are definitely very common within our world. And the more we can use energy modalities to help us facilitate positive actions and positive thoughts, it can only make the world a better place.
I concur, and I think I would like to expand that a bit. If you look at any religion, I don't care what country it's in or what it is, when you look at the core of any religion, the basic attitude of ethics, the application of the golden rule, all of this is there. We get sidetracked into all kinds of other dogma and data or whatever. But those basic principles, when we hold true to that, and if we have intention that we want the highest and the best good for ourselves, sometimes that means we're going to be put into negative situations. It's as if we're being tested to see if we really believe what we are mouthing. And I think that is what sometimes creates chaos in our life, but it's only for the purpose of saying, pay attention. If you really believe this, if this is something that is true, then you need to hold true to that. And you may have some challenges, but you'll get through those challenges. That's what we call developing resilience. And
well said, Donna. That was excellent.
That is something that in our world today, there is a need for that resilience. And it's a resilience of the spirit, of the soul, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's all there. So this is something that her statement to you, I think, is a statement that can be made to everyone. The intention to receive highest good, to give highest good.
You know, that concept of receiving the highest good and asking for the highest good to be allowed within ourselves is something that I teach Reiki, and it's something that we always say when we're working with the clients. We always say we always ask for your highest good. We always ask permission first. Is it all right if I provide you with Reiki? I'd love to ask for your highest good to be received, and it's a wonderful concept. You know, we ask for our highest good. It's again, that positive energy facilitates positive reaction, positive thoughts.
Also, yeah, I really think that that's very important. She also taught you about shielding, and this is something that you'll hear many people in the area of healing saying, you've got to have a shield around yourself. And you found that her visualization technique of envisioning a clear egg shell kind of a protective barrier around yourself, just visualizing that, knowing that you don't want to absorb somebody else's garbage. And I use the term garbage because that's really what it is. I had an experience not that long ago with someone, and they were working on me. They were upset. They were not with me, but they were very, very agitated about so many different things that I remember walking away and saying, what in the world is wrong here? I don't feel good. What's going on? Well, later on in the day, I thought, something's happened. What's happened? And what it was is that I literally absorbed all of this that this person was projecting out. Now, they did not do it with the intention of causing me discomfort. Not at all. But I was being bombarded. And it was something I was able to get rid of. But I thought, whoa, Donna, what a lesson for you. And I think that's a good thing. Share exactly what she said with you.
Sure. And when I teach energy, the use of energy and the awareness of energy, I always talk about shielding. Now, we don't have to shield ourselves unless we, as you say, start to feel bombarded, or we think we're going to be bombarded with negative energy. And so there's all sorts of ways to shield ourselves, but the way Nancy describes it and the way I described it in my book is if we surround ourselves with a clear egg-shaped glass that goes all around us. So it goes above our head, underneath our toes, all around each side of us. And you can set the thickness of the shield any way you want. And traditionally, shields are set anywhere from 6 inches to 12 inches away. And the reason it's clear, away from our body. And so the reason it's clear is that you can see out, we can see out, and people can see in. But I always encourage people who are setting a shield to visualize the edge of the shield, the end of the shield, whether it be 6 or 12 inches away from us, as thick and impenetrable. And so emotions are not able to pass through that shield. Now, it's very hard to actually feel emotions when you're shielded, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect ourselves from not absorbing negative energies. And so usually shields are dissolved, like you actually let them go after like 20 or 30 minutes after you've left the person, or even when the person's walking away, if you can let that shield go, because you don't want to keep a shield up for too long because it deadens us. But it does protect us, and it's a good thing to practice. I don't shield hardly ever because I like to leave myself open to emotions and to love. But when you feel the negativity, shielding is a very good protective device to use.
Becky, it's been a delight having you as a guest. Of course, your formal name is Rebecca Austill-Clausen, and I'll spell that for my listeners. Austill-Clausen, Clausen. Changemaker is a publication that if you have wanted to explore the skills of the mind, if you have lost a loved one, if you are dealing with fear of death, I think this is a very fine publication that allows you to share a journey that Becky has gone through and what it has opened up for her. And when we can share what we've gone through, it enables us then to empower others to maybe find their own resolution in their own particular way. Becky Austill-Clausen, Rebecca, that's your proper name. I want to thank you so much for being with me. And again, for those of you listening, her website is her name, RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. There's no hyphen, though, between those last two names. It's RebeccaAustill-Clausen.com. Thank you for being with me.
Donna, I've had a wonderful time talking with you. You're an excellent interviewer, and it's been glorious talking about the joys of after-death communication, particularly with my brother and my loved ones. And there's nothing special about me. Anybody can do this. So thank you very, very much.
It's my pleasure. And I know we're not yet in the holiday season, but before we know it, it's going to be here. So I wish you, for this last quarter of the year, a most joyous, joyous time.
And Donna, I say the exact same thing to you, and lots of love, always and forever, to you and to all your listeners. Thank you very, very much.
You're more than welcome. God bless. Bye-bye. Donna Seebo here, and we are going to be taking a break. And yes, if you want to give me a call this evening, you can do that. Call me at 253-582-5597, and I will be glad to chat with you, lighting up your life with a little bit of intuitive insight. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Donna Seebo Show. If you'd like to have an opportunity to be featured on this program or Warriors for Peace heard Wednesdays, please send a copy of your publication along with your contact information to the Donna Seebo Show, Post Office Box 97272, Lakewood, Washington 98497. Please allow 6 to 8 weeks for review of the publication. Again, the mailing address is Post Office Box 97272, Lakewood, Washington 98497.
Live a happy life. Turn your average life into a happy life with Paula Vail's book, Why Am I So Happy? Tired of waking up to the same routine, but just a different day? Would you like to live a happy life effortlessly? We want to introduce you to Paula Vail, the author of Why Am I So Happy? Paula is a TV/radio host, Reiki master/teacher, and published author. She understands life's challenges and will guide you in releasing negative thoughts to find emotional and physical joy and balance. Paula shares tips on how to invest in yourself to become the joy-filled person you are meant to be. Paula's book, Why Am I So Happy? Is informative, inspiring, and overflowing with gratitude. Her words benefit both men and women and provide a guide to living a happy, healthy, fun, and prosperous life. Why live the happy life? Because you deserve it. It's that simple. Don't procrastinate because you could be living your happy life now. Purchase Paula's book, Why Am I So Happy? On Amazon.com today.
Donna Seebo here. Oh my goodness, we've got a great lineup of guests. Of course, I am biased, I think, because I have the privilege of, getting so much amazing material from me. And remember, the Donna Seebo Show is on Monday through Friday from 8 until 9 p.m. And callers are welcome during the second half of the show unless I'm on the road traveling. In this month of October, boy, there's a lot of that going on. But know that I always announce through the show whether I'm able to chat with you on the phone or not. And you can always call me at 253-582-5597, and I'll be happy to address any questions, lighting up your life with a little bit of intuitive insight. Who's coming up on the Donna Seebo Show? Barbara Sellers. Get Tough or Die. Quite a title. It's quite a story. Wildhood with Catherine Bowers. This is about teenagers and animals. It'll surprise you. The program, Tony Natalie. This is an utterly unbelievable story of real life happening. Adaptogens. David Winston is calling in from England. Out of the blue, Mary Terhune. We are going to have some interesting commentaries by her. Mother Knows Best, Kara Pickhoffs. Family no matter what. You can have a beautiful divorce. Do you believe that? Well, Sandine Paradon, she can demonstrate it. And, we've got so much more. Don't forget, Warriors for Peace. The doubleheader is every Wednesday, 7 to 8, Warriors for Peace. We are going to be talking about the Warriors Book of Virtues. Matt Bloom and Buzz Bryan are two of the three men who have served, and they put this book together because they felt that it was extraordinarily important that this be something that is shared. It is going to be quite an interview. Bulletproof Spirit, Margins of War, A Cop Doc's Guide to Terrorism, Teen Violence. We've got some powerful subject matter on Warriors for Peace. And just know that these shows, you may miss them, but because you're busy working or whatever, life is the way it is. But you have access to them. Two ways. One, you can go into the archives because we've got thousands of shows there. And number two, we have a player where the latest 13 to 15 hours of programming is available to you in rotation, and that is going all the time, 24/7. So just know that it's our pleasure to be able to provide that for you. And, oh my goodness, it's hard for me to believe that here we are in October. Oh, by the way, the newsletter went out. It went out, and if you did not receive the newsletter, let me know, and I will send it out to you. But it went out, and it's just amazing how that happens. So anyway, every month, first of the month, if you'd like to get a newsletter with up-to-date information, and there's a very powerful story that I put in the editorial that was sent to me. It's a little bit long, but believe me, it'll touch your heart and it'll touch your mind in a way and manner that you would, really be grateful for. It's a story about real experiences with 9/11, but it's not in the U.S. It's in another country. So I think that it is very much worth reading. Now, if you're not on the newsletter list, you can go into my website. The newsletter's there. My calendar's there. All kinds of information is there. And you can access anything that you would like there. Also, if you like us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, my assistant Deb, and we may be adding a fourth social media platform, my assistant Deb makes sure that you get all of the information. I think Instagram is another one that we've added. So regardless, it is there, and it's our pleasure to be able to provide that for you. Now, I do have a recipe this evening, that I wanted to share with you. It's a savory vegetable bread pudding. Now, I know a lot of my listeners are sort of vegetarians. A vegan wouldn't want this, but sometimes we want to have something for our family that is going to taste good and that's easy to prepare. And we go, what can that be? How can I get veggies down my kids? This bread pudding recipe is it. So I want to be sure that you have a pad of paper and pen handy because it is a very good thing to know about. And you know what? It's a great way to use up leftovers, too. Yes, you know me. I've always got some kind of an adaptation to a recipe that I can share. And that's, I think cooking should be that way. I think you need to be able to try a recipe, and you may say, this is a little bland, or, gee, I've got all of this other stuff. I wonder how I could use it. I really think it's a great idea. And I know some people are against leftovers, but if you've got a wild and wacky schedule like I have, sometimes it's a good idea just to cook some things up like a quiche or any kind of a dish that you can go and have, leftovers for when you're in a hurry. Instead of reaching for junk food, you're eating real food. It's a good thing, I think, anyway. Sometimes there are times when one should enjoy the discipline of being quiet, of utilizing science to work for them. Now, there's a lot of demonstrations in our world today where there are those adults that don't do a very good job of exhibiting that. But I came across an illustration for this by one of our former presidents, Calvin Coolidge. Now, he was the 30th president of the United States, and this man apparently was very, very reserved in his presence. And a war was going on, and a reporter wanted to interview him, and this is how the conversation went. The reporter was very disappointed. Reporter: do you wish to say anything about the war threatening Europe? Coolidge: no. Reporter: about the strike in the clothing factories? Coolidge: no. Reporter: about the League of Nations? Coolidge: no. Reporter: about the farm production problems? Coolidge's response was, you got it, no. The reporter, as he got up to leave, obviously very disappointed, Coolidge unexpectedly called him back and said, whatever you do, don't quote me. Oh, my goodness. The commentary that went along with this is that we should never feel pressured into saying something we don't want to say, or in just saying something when you really don't feel like talking. Silence sometimes is not a lack of communication. Sometimes it can be a very effective form of communication, just like Coolidge demonstrated. Very effective. And that is a story that I have to remind myself about, because there are actual times when we may encounter someone who's just a total busybody, not unlike that reporter. And a reporter might say to me, Donna, that's not being very respectful. But having been interviewed by reporters through the years, I have found that so many of them were not interested in really dealing with facts. They wanted to sensationalize things, and I have been misquoted and misrepresented, and I just blamed myself. I said, gee whiz, don't be naive. This is the way a lot of people are. But I will have to say this. There was one occasion where I was interviewed by a reporter, and he didn't change anything. And not only that, but he was gracious, he had integrity, and he did a fabulous job. And I really felt very good about what was said in the printing in a local paper that went out. We need to remember that sometimes there are those scenarios where being an observer and being quiet and listening very carefully might be the great thing to do. When you think about Calvin Coolidge and his response to the reporter, what was he going to say? By keeping silent, the reporter didn't have any ammunition to work with, and there's an advantage to that. The truth is, how could he really talk about something that maybe he didn't have all the facts on? Calvin Coolidge is who I'm referring to. In our world today, 24/7, we're supposed to be able to instantaneously know everything. The sad thing is, we don't take time to check the facts. People make comments. They make assumptions that so often are not even close to the truth. Sometimes I think it's done deliberately to create a distraction so that we don't pay attention to what really needs to be paid attention to. That's just my personal observation and bias. All right, let's get down to this vegetable bread pudding. I know, I'm hungry, so I guess that's why I really want to talk about this. You've got primary ingredients in here that are it's a very, very easy dish to make. Your ingredients, you only have 9. You have a package of frozen chopped broccoli or whatever your favorite vegetable might be. You can even mix your fresh vegetables if you haven't. It's about 10 ounces. You could put a pound of a vegetable in this if you wanted to. You're going to need 2 tablespoons of butter. That should be at room temperature. You need 10 slices of day-old bread. You could use white bread, you could use wheat bread, you could use whatever you want. You could use baguettes if you liked. But remember, it needs to be about a day old, so it has to be slightly dry. You need about 12 ounces of sharp cheddar cheese. I always use a lot more than that. And then 6 eggs, 3.5 cups of milk. And use the whole milk. I mean, you can use evaporated milk, whole milk. And I haven't tried doing this with almond milk or soy milk. That's not my thing. I don't know how it would be with goat's milk. All I know is that I haven't used that. So if there's another kind of milk you want to try this with, you can. You're going to need about 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil leaves. And you could use another spice if you liked. You could use some oregano. Don't be afraid to experiment with flavorings. A little bit of salt, a teaspoon of salt, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. Now, your frozen broccoli, you're going to want to cook it. And this is where leftover vegetables could really come in handy. You want to cook your broccoli or whatever vegetable you choose until it's tender, and just drain it and set it aside. And then with the butter, you can use that to grease your 9x9 by 2-inch oven-proof baking pan. So I want you to know something, too. You could double or triple this. If you had a large group of people, you could triple this recipe easily. And what you want to do, let's say you get some sliced wheat bread or white bread, whatever's your preference. You want to slice it. If it's already sliced, that's even great. Just cut off the crust, feed it to the birds if you want, or use it for another bread pudding. And you want to use a 2 3/4-inch diameter cookie cutter if you really want it to be pretty. And you cut your donut-shaped cookie rounds or donut-shaped bread rounds from 8 slices of the bread, and then your bread trimmings and remaining 2 slices of bread, you can cut that all up into cubes. I said give it to the birds, but you can just cut it up into cubes. Then you want to take a shredder or a food processor and coarsely shred your cheddar cheese. I like the extra sharp. You could use another cheese if you wanted to, but try it with the extra sharp cheddar. It's really good. Then your cheese, your breadcrumbs, or bread cubes, and your drained chopped broccoli. Put it into a large mixing bowl, toss it well, and then spoon it, put it into the prepared baking pan. Now, instead of using butter to grease the pan, I just use nonstick cooking spray. Works just as well. Then you're going to take your donut-shaped bread rings, put them on top of the mixture you've got in the pan, and if necessary, overlap them. And then put your eggs into the mixing bowl, beat it with a wire whisk, add your milk, dried basil leaves, salt and pepper. It's easy when you put it in a blender, or just use your food processor. Zip, zip, it's all mixed. And then just pour that mixture over your vegetable and bread mixture in the pan. Now, this is a key to it. You leave it alone. you let it stand at room temperature. Or if you've got a big crowd, let's say you're making up a big batch of this because you've got company coming the next day, you've got all of this ready to go. Just cover it and then put it in the refrigerator if you're wanting to fix it, cook it the next day. So you want to be sure that you put it out, though, if you've got it for preparation for the next day. You want to be sure that you set it out a good hour and a half before you need to bake it, because it's going to take that long for all of the ingredients to come to room temperature. Your oven needs to be heated to 350 degrees, and you uncover your pan, leave it uncovered if you're going to fix it right away, bake it right away after you've made it, and you put it on the center rack in your oven, bake it for an hour to an hour and 5 minutes until it's beautifully browned and it's a little bit puffy. You'll know, because remember, this is a bread pudding. You'll know it's done because you take a knife and you dip into the center of it, just like you do with a pumpkin pie. And if it comes out clean, it is ready to be served. And this can be 8 servings if you've got a meat you're preparing along with it. But this can really make a meal all by itself. Delicious. And like I said, you can use other vegetables. You could use parsley, garlic. Don't be afraid to embellish this with your own special touch. You could use Mexican cheese where it has the peppers in it, where it's going to be a little bit spicy. Add some cayenne, or some chili pepper to it. You've got all kinds of options. But this is a bread pudding that is so easy to make. Your family will want it over and over and over again. And, for leftovers, can't beat it. It is really great, if there is any left over. Donna Seebo here, 253-582-5597. Well, after chatting with Rebecca and having her share her personal life experiences with the wonderful, wonderful ability of being able to have communication with her brother after he had passed, and the other things that evolved for her, I'm always intrigued by various people's experiences. And if you listen to the show on a regular basis, there's all kinds of stories I like to share. Well, there's a woman by the name of Laura, and she lives in New Jersey. She said it was a Wednesday night, about 11 p.m., and before she went to bed, she checked like she always did, looking out her back door and calling her cat. Now, her cat's name was Jax. She said, I have 4 cats. There's one that's a house cat, but the other 3, including Jax, were feral cats that had become a part of her family. She said they didn't like to stay inside all the time. So during the day, they wandered freely, and then she'd call them into the house at night, and they had a nice warm place and food to eat, and they were safe. Now, this was a wonderful, wonderful relationship. Well, Jax was one that sometimes would stay out later than he should, but after all, this was 11 p.m. at night. She was becoming a little concerned about him because he had gotten apparently into a couple of fights. He would come home and his face would be scratched, or there was just evidence that he had been, as the old saying goes, catting around. And she said to herself, oh my goodness, what if he comes in contact with something that's going to hurt him? What if he doesn't come home? So she called him again, but she couldn't leave the door open because the other cats, who had already come in, might wander out. So she said, I knew I had to go to sleep, so she secured her door, and that was that. Well, she got in bed, and she set her alarm for 2 a.m. because she wanted to see if he was outside the door and was waiting to be let in. So she meditated and had her own form of prayer, and she said, just make sure he's okay. Goes to sleep. Well, it wasn't her alarm that awakened her. It was her cell phone. It was ringing and ringing and ringing. And she had it close by, and she, grabs it, answers, and says, hello. There was no response. Well, she looks at the clock and she said, I wonder who could have called me. Well, it was only 10 minutes after 1 in the morning. Well, she had the feeling that she should go and check the back door. Remember, she had set the alarm for 2 a.m. She goes down, and sure enough, there is Jax waiting for her. She said, if I had not been awakened, she said, I would not have found him there because he probably would have gone off someplace else, and who knows what could have happened. So she let him in, and he let her know that he appreciated that by rubbing against her and purring, and he goes over and gets something to eat. And she started thinking, what exactly woke me up? Well, she looked at her phone, and she said, something's very odd. When she checked her call history, it showed that her phone had called itself on its own. Totally illogical. It should not have happened. She said, but it did. And she said, it had never happened before. And she said, it hasn't happened since, excepting that one night. And she said, ever since that one night, all 4 of my cats have been home and safe and sound. And she said, I've never needed another middle-of-the-night wake-up call. A little bit of the unique and unusual. You know, I think that's where science has a real challenge. Because so many times, experiences that we go through, we find that they are of that moment that we are in that makes us aware of our own safety or alerts us to something we must do. And I have found that happen in my life so many times. It is amazing. I will never forget one time, and I was a teenager when this occurred. I was with a friend, and she was choosing to do something that I knew was not appropriate. And she literally left me out in the middle of nowhere in this city that we were visiting. And I found my way back to the place I needed to find my way back to. And it was all instinctual. It was as if somebody was with me saying, turn right, turn left. And I got back to where I needed to be. There are so many different times in my life when I reflect on it, where there is that awareness, a presence, even information that would come to me in my head. And it was very clear. You know, that can happen to you too. And if you'll just hold close to your heart and your mind the very thing that Rebecca and I spoke about, and that is whatever you do, if you hold it into the intention of the highest good, if you need help or want answers, and know that you can receive that, and you want to receive it in a way that it represents the highest good for you. And if it's not going to suit that purpose, you don't want to bother with it. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I've ignored that, I've always gotten into trouble. Trust yourself. It is something that's not easy for us to do, because all too often we are taught that that is not what we need to do. Perhaps we need to trust someone else, but learning to trust yourself, learning to trust your intuition. Once you get that down, it's always with you, and you're never, ever alone. This is Donna Seebo. I am so delighted that you have been with me. And remember always that you're the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. Don't ever give that up to anybody else. And remember, your dreams can come true. You may have to work for them, as Richard Bach once said. But that's okay. It's worth the effort. Donna Seebo here. Join me tomorrow, right here, same time, same place, same space. Bye for now.
been listening to The Donna Seebo Show. We're delighted that you were able to join us and invite you to tell your friends and family about the program. Have a wonderful day.